Jerusalem, not the city of prayer, but the city beneath it. In 1119, 9 knights were granted an unusual privilege. They were allowed to settle on the Temple Mount, not in a palace, not in a fortress, but in the ruins beneath the Al-Aqsa mosque, the place medieval texts called the Stables of Solomon. Dark, cold, buried. For 9 years. They stayed there. 9 years without explanation, no patrols, no battles, no recorded missions, just silence and digging. Consider the absurdity of the arrangement. King Baldwin II had no reason to hand sacred ground to 9 poor Frenchmen. Al-Aqsa was not a warehouse. It was royal space, prestigious space, politically sensitive space. Yet, he handed them the keys to the underworld. Historians say they were there to protect pilgrims, but 9 men cannot protect a road that stretches for hundreds of miles. It is a mathematical impossibility. So we are left with the uncomfortable alternative. They were not assigned to patrol roads, they were assigned to secure what lay beneath them. And if that's true, then the order did not begin as soldiers. It began as a recovery operation. The Temple Mount is not soil, it is stone, hard limestone, ancient, resistant. Excavating it in the 12th centuries was brutal. No machines, no lighting, no ventilation, only hands, metal tools, firelight. The air below the temple was thick. Dust clung to lungs, sweat mixed with grit. Days blurred into nights, weeks into years. Isolation changes men, and these men were already sworn to silence. What were they looking for? No one wrote it down. That absence matters, because medieval monks documented everything. Yet these 9 knights left no records. Below the temple, the air is different, thicker, stale, dust that doesn't settle because it has nowhere to go. Breathing becomes work. Every swing of a tool becomes a trade. Effort for oxygen. Imagine the sound. Not heroic music, just scraping, chipping, stone giving way by millimeters. Imagine the light. A torch does not illuminate. It pushes back darkness a few feet at a time. Beyond that, black. 9 years in that environment is not a mission. It is a sentence, or an obsession. And the human mind does strange things in long isolation. Men begin to interpret every echo, every draft of air, every hollow sound behind a wall. They start to believe the stone is hiding something from them. Because the Temple Mount is not just any ground, it is layered history. Herod's renovations, Roman destruction, Crusader occupation, Islamic rebuilding, 1,000 years of secrets, pressed into one hill. When they finally emerged, they were transformed. Before Jerusalem, the Templars were poor, illiterate for the most part. Warriors, not scholars. After Jerusalem, something shifted. They expanded rapidly. They accumulated wealth at a pace that made kings uncomfortable. But more importantly, they displayed knowledge they should not have had. Their commanderies followed precise proportions. Their churches used advanced geometry. Their builders understood mathematics that Europe had forgotten. This was not learned on the battlefield. This was intellectual property. And intellectual property is always more valuable than gold, because gold can be taken, knowledge can be replicated, scaled, weaponized. That is the real pattern here. Not they got rich, but they got smart, too fast. Look at Chartres Cathedral. Not its beauty, its mathematics. The ratios embedded in its design align with ancient principles. Golden ratios, harmonic proportions, geometric symmetries known to the Greeks and lost after Rome fell. Then suddenly, they reappear, funded by the Templars, the same order that had spent 9 years beneath the Temple of Solomon. This is not coincidence. Sacred geometry was not decoration. It was power. Because architecture shapes belief. Cathedrals were not just places of worship, they were machines designed to elevate the mind, to induce awe, to guide emotion. If the Templars uncovered architectural knowledge hidden beneath the temple, they didn't just find treasure, they found a system, and systems scale. This was not decoration, it was engineering, and engineering requires exact knowledge. Before the Gothic era, Europe built Romanesque, thick walls, small windows, heavy stone, fortresses of gloom. Then, something changes. The pointed arch appears, the ribbed vault, the flying buttress. The load is redirected outward. Walls no longer need to carry the weight, so the walls vanish. Stone turns into glass, and the building becomes light. That is not a cosmetic improvement. That is a technological leap, an engineering revolution that should have taken centuries. Instead, it happens within a few generations, and the Templars are in the middle of it. Funding, protecting roots, moving skilled labor, moving money, standardizing systems. Here is the uncomfortable implication. If you control financing and you control logistics, then you can shape what gets built. Cathedrals were not just places of worship, they were machines designed to produce awe, to shape behavior, to direct belief. Sacred geometry is not mystical math, it is psychological architecture. Build a space that makes people feel small, and they will look upward. Build a space that funnels sound, and they will hear authority as if it comes from the sky. If the Templars recovered old principles beneath the Temple Mount, principles known in antiquity, then they didn't find treasure. They found a toolkit, a blueprint for controlling emotion at scale. That is dangerous knowledge, because it doesn't just build buildings, it builds obedience. Ask the uncomfortable question: how did an order of warrior monks suddenly become master financiers, master builders, master logisticians? They didn't just move money, they optimized systems, banking, construction, supply chains. This wasn't magic, it was applied knowledge, and knowledge is always dangerous. Let's be specific. They pioneered something that sounds mundane today, but in the 12th century, it was revolutionary. A traveler could deposit gold at a Templar house in Paris, receive a coded document, cross a continent, and withdraw the equivalent in Jerusalem. No caravans of treasure, no bandits, no physical transport. They turned heavy metal into paper. They made wealth liquid. That single system changes everything. Because once you can move money safely, you can move armies, fund crusades, finance kings, and when kings come to you for loans, the relationship flips. A king with debt is not a king. He is a hostage with a crown. This is why the Templars became untouchable. Not because they were holy, because they were indispensable. They sat at the intersection of war and finance, a place where morality is always negotiable. Now as we enter dangerous territory, not because it is mystical, but because it is destabilizing. Some theories suggest the Templars uncovered evidence beneath the temple, evidence that challenged the hierarchy of Christianity itself, not denying Christ, but reframing him, elevating another figure, John the Baptist. In some early sects, John was not a precursor. He was the central figure, a prophet of purity, of initiation, of continuity. If the Templars found texts suggesting this tradition survived, the Church's authority fractures, because orthodoxy depends on sequence. Disrupt the sequence, and legitimacy collapses. There is a historical reason this idea survives. In the Middle East, there are ancient sects that venerated John in unique ways. Some Gnostic currents treated him as the true herald. Some treated Jesus as a later distortion. Whether those groups influenced the Templars is uncertain, but the political logic is clear. If the Templars had texts suggesting an alternative spiritual lineage, then they carried a spiritual virus. A whisper that says, the Church is built on the wrong foundation. For Rome, this is not just heresy, it is existential. Later accusations described a severed head, a bearded idol, Baphomet, but symbols mutate under fear. Some scholars argue Baphomet was not a demon, but a corrupted reference, a relic, a representation, a mnemonic device, John's head, the symbol of forbidden continuity. If true, the accusation of heresy was not invented from nothing, it was weaponized misunderstanding. And that's how effective smear campaigns work. You take a strange fragment, you amplify it, you sexualize it, you demonize it, and suddenly the public doesn't ask for evidence, they ask for fire. Now as we reach the most dangerous hypothesis, not because it is sensational, but because of what it implies. Sangreal, shift the spacing. Sang real, royal blood. This is not about romance, it is about succession. The Vatican's authority rests on apostolic succession, popes chosen by men, power passed institutionally. But a bloodline? A rex deus, a lineage chosen by birth. If the Templars held proof of such a line, they held leverage over every throne in Europe. Kings rule by divine right, but blood outranks crowns. This is why the idea is fatal, not mystical, political. And here is the key psychological point. Even if the claim is false, the belief in the claim is enough to destabilize empires. A rumor of legitimacy can topple a kingdom, because legitimacy is a shared hallucination. Once people stop believing, power collapses. If you understand that, you understand why a king would destroy an order without warning. Philip IV didn't seize documents, he seized bodies because he misunderstood the threat. Gold can be stolen, knowledge cannot. By the time the arrests came, whatever mattered most was already gone. Moved, hidden, encoded. The purge failed at its deepest level. This is the part that should bother you. A regime does not move with that level of coordination unless it is terrified. Philip was drowning in debt, but debt alone does not explain the brutality, not the speed, not the cruelty, not the need to paint them as monsters. That looks like fear. Fear that the asset was not money. Fear that it was leverage, information, something that could survive the destruction of men. So where did it go? Here we enter the zone of probabilities, not certainties. Contemporary reports describe a fleet leaving under cover of night. Sails marked with the Red Cross, ships sitting low in the water, heavy. That detail is important, because a light ship sits high. A heavy ship carries weight. Gold, archives, relics, tools, maps. We can't prove the cargo, but we can follow the logic. If you are moving something dangerous, you move it to the place your enemy cannot reach. Some theories say Scotland, Robert the Bruce, a king at war with Rome. Others say Portugal, rebranding into the Order of Christ, continuity under a new name. But there is a third path, the one that creates the next file. What if they didn't stop at the edge of the map? What if they followed the stars, west, to a land that, officially, did not exist yet? So what did the Templars find? We cannot say, but we can trace the consequences. Knowledge surfaced where it should not have. Architecture advanced overnight. Symbols persisted. Anomalies appeared. Not declarations, traces. And in the next file, we follow those traces. Across oceans, across centuries, into places history insists should be empty. This investigation continues. If you want to follow the next file, subscribe to the Templar Files. Some questions were never meant to disappear.